To breaking news, the Queensland government's launched a sweeping review into puberty blockers, suspending new subscriptions immediately after explosive allegations surfaced against the Cairns Sexual Health Service, the clinic accused of prescribing puberty blockers and gender-affirming therapy to children as young as 12 without required consultation and parental consent. Out of 42 children treated, 17 were prescribed blockers and hormones, reportedly outside recognised guidelines. A 2024 internal review found failings, including unqualified staff, scope of practice breaches and a lack of parental consent. It sparked an investigation into the clinic and a review of governance framework, which allowed the clinic to operate outside the boundaries of its service.
Wow, okay, so when exactly can we expect the charges? I mean, these people were prescribing gender hormones to kids as young as 12 without parental consent. I mean, I don't think these things should be given to kids with parental consent. But this rogue clinic up in Cairns, Queensland, has just been giving these fucking drugs out like they're Skittles. And finally, the state government looks like they're doing something about it. They've announced a pause on the prescription of puberty blockers and sex hormones to minors, like that should have been a thing anyway, until this Cairns bullshit is sorted out. And that's not all. The federal government, after it received an open letter from a bunch of senators, has ordered a review of the treatment guidelines for trans and gender diverse children. Now, how much of that is just going to be window dressing and how much is actually going to be substantive? I don't know. We're talking about the Albanese government here, but let's have a look. So just imagine for a second you're the parent of one of these kids in Cairns who fronted up to a gender clinic and were prescribed sex hormones without your consent or knowledge. I mean, pissed off doesn't even begin to describe how I'd feel. Like I said in the intro, I don't think kids should be anywhere near sex hormones. I mean, how can you expect a 12-year-old to have the capacity to understand their gender? I mean, most 12-year-olds haven't even started puberty yet, and these people want to block these kids' natural biological processes, and not only that, prescribe sex hormones. I mean, I've heard so many transgender activists claim that puberty blockers are completely reversible and there's no harm, there's nothing to worry about.
If the kid doesn't end up being transgender, they're completely reversible. You can just stop taking hormone blockers and your puberty will progress normally. I don't see the risk.
How can they be truly reversible? I mean, you don't get the opportunity to be 12 or 13 again, and no one really knows the long-term effects of halting this process at such a young age. And cross-sex hormones, for Christ's sake, give me a fucking break. Pumping a young girl full of testosterone or pumping a young boy full of estrogen is obviously going to deviate their sexual development. It's going to affect their sexual function when they're older. It's going to affect their fertility. Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive into papers and studies and reviews. I'm a fucking cartoon bear on the internet. I just reckon, and call me old-fashioned, that tinkering with the sexuality of a kid is fucking wrong. I mean, usually if someone messes with a child sexually, they're called a pedophile. But as soon as it's some guy in a white coat handing out pills, it's gender-affirming care. It's not on, and the world's starting to wake up to this.
The left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple. Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children.
That was Donald Trump making a promise in the run-up to the US election. And he delivered. On the 28th of January, he signed an executive order called Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. And it's not just the US. On the 11th of December last year, the UK banned puberty blockers.
Puberty blockers for under 18s with gender dysphoria will be banned indefinitely in the UK after experts warned of an unacceptable safety risk.
And it's not just the US and the UK. While they're not completely banned, European countries like France, Finland, Norway, Denmark and Sweden have severely tightened their regulations around puberty blockers. It's just a shame that Australia, or Queensland in particular, needed something like the Cairns Sexual Health Clinic fiasco to happen to follow suit, even if it's temporarily. I mean, it's not like we didn't have whistleblowers.
Well, joining me is Gillian Spencer, who tried to raise her concerns with how Queensland's Children's Gender Service was dealing with so-called transgender children and was stood down as a senior child psychologist at the Queensland Children's Hospital. Gillian, great to see you. Thanks for coming on. The new Queensland government has now stopped giving puberty blockers to children who claim they're transgender until it hears from an inquiry into this. Do you feel vindicated in some way?
Well, just before we hear from Gillian, hopefully we can make this a permanent thing. Hopefully it's not just a pause until we find out what's going on with the Cairns situation. For Christ's sake, I know we're usually 10 years behind the trend in Australia, but let's keep up for the sake of our children.
I feel relieved. I'm very relieved about the Queensland LNP government's decision yesterday. And it gives me hope because finally we seem to have some politicians who have the courage to do what is right and to stare down any ridiculous allegations of transphobia, because this really is a child protection issue.
Oh, there's going to be lots of allegations of transphobia, believe me. They can't help themselves. I made a comment on Twitter last year, I think. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something like, I hope my child doesn't grow up to be transgender. And the fucking shit that I copped. People are saying, oh my God, you're fucking transphobic, oh, you fucking terrible person. And I'm thinking, hang on, all you fucking hear about is how depressed trans people are, how persecuted they are, how suicidal they are. No, I don't want my child to be transgender, for fuck's sake. Why would I want her to end up being transgender? Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't love her unconditionally, but you see what I mean. If it's anything other than their way, it's obviously transphobia. You're obviously trying to genocide the trans people. You're a hateful bigot and you should shut up and go to hell. Now, let me clarify, I'm a live and let live person. I've got no issue with trans people. If you want to wear a dress and pretend you're a chick, that's fine. I don't care. You're free to do that. But I'm not going to be scared out of my own opinion. You can fuck off.
All we want is for the services for children with gender distress to be evidence-based and to not cause the serious lifelong harms that we know that puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones and gender surgeries do. And I'm super relieved that the government has taken charge, because one of the most disturbing things I've seen in recent years is the lack of courage of people occupying senior roles in the hospital. And it really isn't right how many people kept quiet about the harms being done to children in the gender clinic. So yes, I think that senior hospital executives' heads should roll over this issue.
Yeah, so do I. Now, she's about to tell us that when she raised concerns as a senior child and adolescent psychiatrist at the Queensland Children's Hospital, she was dismissed. She was silenced. She wasn't given whistleblower status and she was suspended from her position.
You were suspended after questioning the use of puberty blockers at the Queensland Children's Gender Service, challenging what's called the affirmation model, which means essentially agreeing to the child's gender is what they think it is. What happened?
Oh, well, my concerns were dismissed and I was marginalised. I've actually been suspended now for 21 months. But going back to 2.5 years to mid-2022, I had meetings with my bosses where I disclosed to them about the harms being done to children through the gender clinic. And with the Queensland public interest disclosure process, the hospital gets 3 opportunities to decide whether someone is providing information about a danger, and if they are, then they qualify as a whistleblower and they're owed protection. But with my 3 hospital appeals, each time the hospital said that I hadn't made a public interest disclosure, and the reason they gave was that they thought that the harms that I disclosed, which were infertility, lack of sexual function and long-term physical health problems, weren't serious or specific enough to qualify as a public interest disclosure. So, yep, I think heads should roll because this hospital has behaved appallingly. And not just to me, this is to the parents and children of Queensland. So, yes, I've appealed that decision through the Industrial Relations Commission and I'm awaiting a judgment.
Well, she seems like a sensible one and I think she should get her position back. Now, I'm really looking forward to this federal inquiry. I mean, will anything really come of it? I don't know. I have my doubts. But the process is going to be interesting. And we got a sneak peek of that the other day from Senator Malcolm Roberts.
Why should the Australian taxpayer be funding the Commission to argue for children to make irreversible changes to their body that we have no good clinical evidence for? And why the hell are you in court arguing for children on puberty blockers? Very low rigour. When are you going to stop going to court at taxpayer expense arguing for these experimental, life-changing, irreversible, mentally damaging chemical treatments to be given to children.
One of the fundamental human rights that we all have is a right to health care, and that includes for children.
You say on your opening statement, human rights are the blueprint for a decent, dignified life for all. Human rights are the key to creating the kind of society we all want to live in. Could you tell me what is the field of human rights? What rights are encompassed in the field of human rights? Very low rigour.
Now, obviously, I've fucked with that a bit for the entertainment, but he does ask the hard-hitting questions, and I can't wait to see more of it, because I feel like the world is starting to wake up, and maybe, just maybe, Australia has this opportunity to follow suit, because I don't think, and this might be controversial, I don't think a kid can be transgender, and I think a lot of the kids that claim to be transgender, in some way, are influenced by batshit insane parents. I'll never forget this clip. I originally saw this on Timcast, but remember Jazz Jennings? Jazz was like one of the first transgender kids back in like the early 2000s, maybe 2008 or 9, something like that. And she or he, whatever the fuck, has this absolute mental patient for a mum. Here, watch this. It's not good quality, but you'll get the gist.
We have a dilation problem.
That is a concern. When you don't have that watchful eye, they tend to go back to old patterns.
I have woken Jazz out of a dead sleep and taken the dilator and put the lubrication on it and said, here, you take this and you put it in your vagina. If not, I will.
Now let's just digest that. This is going to get a bit graphic. But Jazz Jennings got gender confirmation surgery, in other words got a wound they call a vagina at 17. And to maintain that vagina and make sure it doesn't close over, they have to dilate it. They have to insert an object into it every now and then. And so Jazz's mum is saying she wakes him up and says, here, I have this lubricated stick for you to insert in your vagina, son. If you don't do it, I will forcefully do it. I mean, how fucked up is that? That's like prison time shit. In what other circumstance would a parent wake their child up and say, you stick this in your vagina or I will? Like I said, I don't think kids can be trans, and I don't think the parents that advocate for their kids being trans are right in their head. Anyway, this has been a serious one. I'll be back again this week with a bit of fuckery for you. But in the meantime, if you have any comments, leave them down below or at my Twitter. It's at bear_ing. Alright, I'll catch you later. Thanks for watching. Ta-ta. Bye-bye.
Recession, session. Give me better times, better times.